these scenarios that you're describing, I don't want you to work at Parity. But
Welcome to Crypto Interviews. My name is Claudio, and this is Cryptosh, the channel that brings you crypto news, reviews, tutorials, and interviews. But today we're not actually going to be interviewing anyone, although I'm titling it this way. We're actually going to be talking about something really important to the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem and its future. And this is in relation to the future of the Canary networks on Kusama. Do they have a future? Are they here to stay? Or will they disappear eventually? And joining me to discuss this topic is Sam Elamin, co-founder of Imbue Network on Kusama, and also Christian from Oak Network and Turing. Guys, what do you think about the situation with the Canary networks to begin with?
Christian, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I think anyone who knows me knows that I'm a pretty big fan of Kusama. Obviously I'm a big fan of Dot as well, but I'm a big fan of the Canary system. I think it creates a lot of opportunities for innovative products, which I think being involved in a blockchain, you're always going to be looking at new innovative services. So I think it creates a lot of opportunity. I think it's definitely advancing from where it was when we first launched like the initial parachains. And I think there's probably some arguments where potentially some types of parachains don't necessarily need to have a Canary network as well. But I think the usefulness of Kusama is only going to continue, and I'm still a big supporter of it. And I think we'll see some great things in there in the future for sure.
Sam, what do you think?
Well, I would say Kusama is one of the main reasons we chose Polkadot, right? Coming from a traditional software engineering background, I absolutely see the need of having this phased approach where you try out new things. And that's in traditional Web 2 world, and the traditional Web 2 world where you know a lot more about building software than it is in the blockchain world, right? We are all pioneers here. We're all learning as we go along, and it's actually surprising that other networks don't have it. I just imagine, all the things that have gone into Polkadot not having a stage or environments which are of less risk. Well, that's essentially what a Canary network is. Allows you to try out new ideas, try out new things that you don't even know will work. With real traffic is essentially testing in production, and that is something that I genuinely think is really, really useful. I think the one drawback I think that I am yet to be convinced of so far is the need for both two different tokens, right? I understand why from a technical perspective it's not possible, because it's not bridged, networks aren't bridged, right? You can't use the same token on both. But from a business perspective, assuming that technical challenge is solved and you deal with the security and the consensus implications, I think from a business perspective, you really shouldn't have two tokens, because the token is meant to power your network, power the utility inside your network, and one utility on one network should be the same on another, even though you have access to different features, fair enough, but the utility itself, what I can do with the token, should be the same. The fungibility between both of them should be the same. So that's why I think, when I compare Canary networks in the Web 2 world and the level of access, for example, my login and what I can do in a particular product, I don't have two different logins for a Canary network and a production environment in the one that's open to the public. But in Kusama and in Polkadot, they're different. Now I need two different logins technically if you consider the token as the Web 2 login. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and we're going to get to the two token model structure as well. But first, I want to talk about what would actually happen. How would it impact the future of these parachains if you only had the ones on Polkadot, but not the ones on Kusama when it comes to testing features? I mean, could you get all the work done on an actual test network with no live data?
No.
Or how
not that I'm aware. Or you could,
have?
not well. I don't think you could do it well if you just go straight to Polkadot. I think that's slightly immature, and you'd have to be extremely confident that whatever you built can handle the traffic and operates in real time. I mean, in software, we say you never know, you can never know how whatever you build operates until you run it through traffic, real traffic, and it's going to be very difficult to simulate the real traffic continuously in a dev environment. I don't know about you, Christian.
I pretty much agree. I think right now it's not really that feasible. Potentially in the future, when the cross consensus mechanism bridges are much more set up so that you can really, and I think if you have a product that has an extreme security kind of onus, where that's something that has to be like the core focus, and you're not doing heaps of traffic, there may be a potential to only go straight to Polkadot and really just utilize your Rococo test net quite a lot. So there's still potential to do that, but I think it's worth it to really be considering what you can be doing on Kusama. I think something that you mentioned earlier, I think from an engineering perspective, anyone that has like a technical experience usually really likes Kusama. They like the benefits of those quicker runtime upgrades, like the shorter delegation, the quicker governance proposals. From an engineering and technical perspective, it's just really beneficial. But I think there's a little bit of contradiction there and a little bit of tension between, like business kind of investment and managing of two tokens and really utilizing the technical foundation. But I think it depends what your priority is as an organization. And I think eventually we will likely see only Polkadot parachains, but the majority of them, I think, will utilize their Canary system on Kusama.
Interesting. So we know that Kilt have recently announced a migration from Kusama. They're abandoning us. How could they? No more chaos for them, right? But they're moving to Polkadot and they're going to have everything there. So, I mean, how do you see, obviously, because none of you guys are from Kilt, it's hard to give, but just from your personal point of view, how do you see something like this? I mean, if you had to do this, if you are let's say you are forced to do it, let's say Parity said no more Canary networks, you guys have to migrate to Polkadot, how would that impact you as a business, do you think? If you want to kick it off, maybe Christian this time, and then Sam.
Yeah, sure. So I'll jump in. So I'm a big supporter of Kilt. I've been a fan of them for a while, and I think Kilt, it really makes sense the necessity to move to Polkadot because the type of consumers that they're looking at means that they have that really strong security minded focus. So they really need that extra layer of security. So it makes sense to utilize Kusama to have their tests and then go to the area where there's much better security. I think the removal of Kusama would be very disadvantageous for us because we really want to work with new products. So the ability for them to launch on Kusama early means that we can work with them earlier. If we have to wait for everyone to open up XCMP and HRMP channels on Polkadot, that just delays the time before we can really work with them, and it just creates inefficiencies. So we really like the Kusama system because it means we can test it in a small environment and it's very legitimate. So we would hate to see Kusama go.
Interesting. And Sam?
Yeah, and I'll be the same. If someone comes to me and says, if Parity come in and say we're removing Kusama, I think my first question would be why. I'd be asking why like 10 or 15 times because from inside, I feel like my gut instinct would be that's a bad idea, right? Just forcing everyone to go to Polkadot just because there's this view that there's more traffic in Polkadot defeats the purpose, of ensuring that we are confident. Kusama more than anything gives us confidence that what we push to Polkadot is going to be secure and stable. Some might say that the confidence is more important than the traffic than the traffic coming into it. The knowing that I'm not going to break production as an engineer is far more important than how many people are going to use this particular feature. Obviously, other people in the business or other people in the community might feel differently, but the most important thing for a blockchain is to continue to produce blocks. So, I would always push back as to no, but if it's enforced hypothetically in this hypothetical scenario, I would eventually just replicate Kusama with a few parachains and say, listen, this we need somewhere we can have a long running chain where we can test our features, and then we test remember, the most important thing for Polkadot for us personally is the communication. All we've seen so far from XEM has been transferring of assets, but the real power of interoperability is the communication between these chains, and then being able to call functionality in a different piece of a different chain, or notify or something. That communication is really, really powerful. And you need a place where you can try out these things. You don't do it for the very first time in production. That's suicide. So yeah, I think I would just not be happy if Kusama goes away. It's my safety net. That really gives us an idea of how this thing will operate in production.
Yeah. So if that would be the case, would you then use Rococo to do your testing?
Yeah. So Rococo is really interesting because it's a larger place where multiple chains have some form of presence, right? And it's really important to have that, but unfortunately, it doesn't really simulate real traffic, right? It doesn't. It's a staging environment that's supposed to be a long running chain, but you don't have access to really go through what you would expect production to look like.
Yeah, no block production delays. Everything is fast on Rococo, right?
No, there are certainly block production delays there, but it's more. I think Rococo is similar to your own dev environment, right, where you have a lot more control than you would have in Kusama, and certainly far more than you would have in Polkadot. But at the same time, I don't think there's enough focus on it to simulate Kusama. It's not open to the wider business. Now imagine I want to do A/B testing, which is essentially, look, I want to do I want to do something here, or potentially another thing here, and I want to see how people interact with this functionality, right? That's essentially what A/B testing is. And if I do that in Rococo, I have to simulate both users. But if I look at my metrics, and I know like maybe 5 or 10% of the users actually are on Kusama, while Polkadot has 90 or 80% of my users, then I can try this feature with a subset of my users on Kusama and gain much more knowledge about this feature and which one should I use. Right? This is traditional Web2 data-driven decisions that I look at all the other ecosystems. It's very, very difficult to do this. On another blockchain, but it's absolutely imperative if you want to make data-driven decisions.
Interesting. And then now let's move on to the dual token model talk. So what do you think? I mean, Sam, you're only on Kusama at the moment. I don't know if you're planning to go on Polkadot as well eventually, but we know that Christian, Oak Network and Turing, right? We don't have Oak yet, but it's happening. I mean, it's just been announced recently now that got I think today is the last day for people to unstake their DOT in order to take part in the Oak Network Crowdloans. So I've mentioned that in a recent news video as well for people. If you are interested, by the way, the link can be found in the description of this video if you want to take part. I'm not trying to promote, but it's just the right opportunity now because we've got an Oak Network member here. So let's talk about the dual token model. How do you see? I mean, do you see it as something positive? Is it going to impact the community in the long run? And I mean, by the community, I mean the retail investor and also the private investors. It's just the way it is at the moment, right? You've got private investors in both in some cases. In other cases, you don't have any private investors, like with Imbue Network. And in other cases, you've got no private investors in the Canary, but you do have them in the main one on Polkadot. So how do you think that's going to work? Sorry, you're on mute, Sam.
I'll jump in. I think there's pros and cons to it, like many things of maintaining two blockchains. Definitely from an investment perspective, it adds a layer of complexity, which can be like difficult for people getting involved within the ecosystem to create an understanding of what's going on, especially like you were mentioning when there's a level of investment in one side of the token but not on the other side. But I think at the current stage, we really don't have a solution to how to really manage that. And regardless of the separation from the two coins, those two coins are always going to be relatively linked. So I think the system is kind of working as intended for its current purpose right now. We may see some form of advancement and changes to that system of running two tokens, but right now it's kind of more of a symptom of of really wanting to have that independent blockchain running on Kusama. If it has a token that's too tied to your mainnet, well, then you lose a lot of the usefulness of having that token and that environment where you can kind of create these new services and products, because you're too, there's that introduces so much risk. So I personally don't mind it, as long as it does create a barrier to entry where you have to be putting in the research to understanding the differences between a network's two tokens. But I think if you do get to that level, it creates more good than it does inconvenience. But I might be a little bit biased on that.
So
Yeah. So I guess this is where I come in as someone with very, very different radical thoughts. So please forgive me. But you know, I guess for me, the the I just don't understand, I guess, the need of the dual token model in the future, right? I know it's absolutely necessary today. I know why all the chains chose to go down the two token model. I would probably have done the same, right? I don't think there was any other option otherwise. The only alternative I can think of is just to say, look, we're going to mint X amount of our supply here and the majority of our supply there, but it's just still going to be the one token model. But then you think, but then what's the point? They're still, for all intents and purposes, separated, never to meet. But for me, the fact that you have that single token model, despite the fact that it's much more difficult, you're still going to maintain two blockchains, regardless of whether it's a single token or a dual token, right? For me, the need for having a single token means your whole community is unified. You don't have two different communities. You don't have these conversations that are currently happening saying, oh, you guys are focusing on the Polkadot network and you're ignoring the Kusama network, right? You're obviously that thing's going to become your test net, but it isn't. It is not a test net, right? So for me, the explanation of the two networks is even more difficult because of the two tokens. That's one. Another point I really want to highlight is what drew us all to Polkadot, at least I think on a base level, is the interoperability, right? And we always said, you know, this isn't an ETH killer. It's supposed to work alongside Ethereum, right? As opposed to all the other previous ETH killers. So then one thing remains in my head where I'm like, if we know for Polkadot to succeed, it needs to interoperate with other networks, and we know it needs to operate with Ethereum, how can it interoperate with Ethereum when it won't interoperate with Kusama? So that's really what clicked in my head. We have to, out of every other network external to Polkadot, the one we have the most control over is Kusama. So it's the most likely to interoperate between Polkadot and Kusama. And once you sort out that interoperability, once you're able to connect them, then the need for a second token really becomes a much weaker argument to say, you know, they're interoperating, which means I can move one of these tokens here to there, which now means that the functionality, or not the functionality, the utility here, the voice that I have on the Kusama network should have an equal voice in the Polkadot network. Because when you look at decentralization and the governance, the vote of one token should be the same in the network because they're linked. They're very much so linked. So I don't want to have a higher voice on Kusama than I would on Polkadot, because then I feel like I might not be getting features, or I might not be an equal citizen in both, right? When it's a dual token, you absolutely are not, unless you're somehow ensuring that you have the same number of tokens on both, and that's just a pain. So that ultimately is really what brought me to the understanding that we have to interoperate. And because we have to interoperate, then we can absolutely have a single token model. It's harder for the team. It's harder for the people managing the project. Absolutely it is. But it's the most likely solution for the community, the most likely solution that will make the community happy.
Yeah.
The fact that you don't have to split your
Community
focus,
as well,
your
and
community. Exactly. So and it's not a competition anymore. It isn't this is better than this. It's more like this is what we learned here, and I'm going to use the same voting power, the same utility that I had over here as well. So yeah, so I completely understand why we didn't mention. I didn't get a chance to speak about Kilt. I really respect them. They're one of the chains that chose the single token model. So their mentality resonates with me as well. But what they've done is they've migrated. I think what they're going to do is they migrate to that, and because that bridge isn't available, I think having the conversation about the dual token model can only happen once we know of a solution. There isn't one at the moment. So I don't think any other I can really fault any other chain. I really do not think so. But as long as we know that the conversation needs to happen, that's the only way we move forward.
Yeah. And I mean, there's Bifrost who are on both Kusama and on Polkadot using the same coin now, as far as I'm aware. And now that you mentioned the dual token model and the differences between, as we know, we do have differences between Kusama and Polkadot for some of these, right? Like, for example, let's say Moon River, who has 10 million total supply on Kusama and 1 billion on Polkadot. I mean, how, like, for something like this, if you are in this kind of situation and you already had everything traded on the open market, how would you make the community happy with the merger of the one token model without impacting them? Because everything is trading differently, the supply is different, it's a huge mess. It's okay if you're brand new, if you're just starting and you just like you did, for example, Sam with Imbue, you're on Kusama, you've got a certain supply. Now if you go to Polkadot, you can just simply say, okay, I've got the same supply, the same thing, it's on Polkadot, I'm going to merge it when the bridge comes, whatever, and you're going to have an option there, so it's going to be easier. But when you're trading on the open market with two different supplies, different prices, how do you manage something like that from a technical perspective? And I think for Turing and Oak, I think we're going to see that kind of situation. Christian,
go ahead, Christian. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important to remember that whilst there is a level of independence between the two chains and the two tokens, the products that you're offering are usually very tied to each other. So it's not like we have to split like our development 50-50 and then do everything double up. We take things from a higher level, and then we consider like the availability of is it going to be important for Turing, or is it going to be valuable for Oak, or is it going to use both, or is it going to do some hybrid system to kind of utilize all these different chains across Kusama and Polkadot. I think similar to what Sam was saying, it's the cross consensus bridge between Kusama and Polkadot will change the dynamic of a lot of these things, especially when it's like properly set up and tested and working really well. But there's definitely a lot of difficulties. Like I'm glad you mentioned governance. Anyone who follows me knows that I'm hugely into governance, and I think the two token system works. It works. The governance system is based on that idea. Trying to set up a system with one token for two chains that have slightly different rules with one governance system is probably going to be relatively difficult. I'm sure it's doable, but it really depends like what your team wants to do. Do you want to be focusing on this, or do you just want to use the current system and utilize the two chains? So I think one of the best things about the Polkadot ecosystem is it's important to there's a lot of customization of setting up your network the way you want to do it. You can do it like this, or you can do it like that. And Polkadot doesn't want to be the kind of system where it's like you have to do it like this. And the good teams will utilize that fact and set it up how they want. And I don't think there's one best way. What's important is understanding what your needs are and then following through that way. So I'm sure we'll see successful parachains that have one token, some that have two. It's really about understanding what your needs are there, as opposed to what the best thing to do is.
Yeah, no, but my question is more about the complexity of switching from when you're already in this situation of a very difficult situation, right? Because you now got two tokens, which are two coins, I should say, trading at different prices, a totally different supply, and then you have to do that merger because everyone else is doing the merger, right? To a one token model or one coin model. How are you going to manage that for the community? Because, I mean, I don't know. To me, it just seems like an impossible thing to do, but I'm
Yeah,
sure there might be
I
a
would
way.
I would argue that there's really no good solution to that problem, and the only way that any chain would probably consider doing that, like you mentioned, Moonriver and Moonbeam, would be if there'd been a catastrophic event which required them to do that. I don't think any of those chains would do that for just because it seemed like anyone else was doing it. I think it would be so detrimental for them, especially like Moonriver really utilizes that Canary network. They push a lot of referendums and proposals through their system, which having that like quarter of a duration time, it gives them so much advantage. So I'd be very surprised to see something like that. But yeah, I think even from a technical perspective, it would be really difficult. I know if I pitched it to my engineers, they'd just be like, nope. So like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to have camps on both sides. People are going to be happy about it if you give them something good, something that is going to, you know, provide them with more than they have, or at least the same, which is going to be very hard. But you're always going to have people complaining. And then how do you manage that side of the community, right? When it starts. So yeah. So Sam, what do you think?
So I think essentially what we're describing is how do we do the migration? At least that's what I got from your question. And you know, assuming there's consensus within both sides that this is what we want to do. There's a majority vote on both sides because you need that consensus. Then it's a matter of migrating and choosing how you want to migrate. You know, whether you're gonna burn and then airdrop an X amount, or do you want to, you know, just do the same thing but rename it? That's what Karura did with AUSD, for example. You know, so there's already it's like Chris said. What the beauty of Polkadot and Substrate is, it's not opinionated. You're absolutely free to do what you want, however you want to do it. But it's up to the consensus. Something Chris really highlighted that was really useful to at least mention again is how the voting works differently, or the governance work differently, and the lower thresholds on Kusama. That can still remain the same. You know, it just means it's a single it's one token that can transfer, and once you move it to Polkadot, you'll follow the rules that are on Polkadot. If you move it to Kusama, you'll follow the rules that are on Kusama. You still get the benefits of the Canary network. Absolutely, this is absolutely required. It just means that it's fungible between both of them, and you don't have that split. But you know, like Chris said, I don't think there is a best practice that's been defined. This will only come with time, and eventually it's the communities that will choose what's best for them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, that's been interesting. I really appreciate that. And what do you guys think overall as a final question? Do you think Parity are considering removing the Canary network narrative, or do you think it's here to stay for the foreseeable future? Sam?
I'll go first.
Or Christian,
first.
sorry, go ahead. No, Christian, go ahead.
Let's go. Yeah, no, I would be completely shocked if Parity showed any form of interest of discontinuing Kusama. I think if you listen to Gavin talk about Kusama, he seems extremely proud about it, and I think the ideology behind the testnet of Kusama and the embracing the chaos and having this area where it's really friendly for developers, I think is really in line with the philosophy of Polkadot right now. And it would really contradict their kind of ideas if they were to turn around and be like, yeah, we're not that interested in this. I think we may potentially see some changes to the crowd loan system, especially for parachains that are re-upping their lease. So there may seem some differences there, but I think overall Kusama has been a relatively huge success, and that Parity is pretty proud of it, and that they'll probably continue. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I echo those thoughts. I don't think it's going away at all. And even hypothetically in your scenario, and these scenarios that you're describing, I don't want you to work at Parity, but the concept of Parity telling chains what to do, it just goes against their ethos, right? Of ensuring that, you know, the chains have full freedom. They're not opinionated at all. and they're not going to do what you described. What they might do is give options, or recommendations. Okay, you want to do this one token model? This is how these other chains have done it. So these are some of the pains. They're there for guidance, really, rather than telling people what to do and what not to do. So I don't think they're going to take the Kusama network away. What they might do is guide people on how potentially they can make both networks interchangeable, and they do that by showing them how Polkadot and Kusama are interoperable.
Yeah. Now, and my other concern is not necessarily, taking away the Canary network, but more so stopping development or slowing down development in that area and focusing more on the Polkadot section. I mean, that could also cause deprecation effects, right?
No, it's not technically possible, because all changes, the way you write your code is your runtime. Your runtime is a collection of palettes and how the chain operates. So virtually any change that you make onto the substrate modular framework goes to Kusama first and goes to Polkadot. The idea that you're going to skip Kusama and go directly to Polkadot is not even possible, unless you specifically say, I'm not upgrading Kusama and I'm going to upgrade Polkadot. But
Okay,
any change that goes into the modular framework, I mean, you can, but it just wouldn't make sense, because why go to the more risky option? But the changes go into the underlying building blocks rather than the Kusama chain as it is. So it just wouldn't make sense to try and make changes to Polkadot and not Kusama, because you're making changes to the building blocks themselves.
That's interesting. But one thing that I want to mention then is that the same rule doesn't apply to the Canary networks, or sorry, to the parachains. Because, I mean, although Polkadot always has a copy of what Kusama has, and vice versa, this isn't the case for the canaries, right? For the Canary parachains, because the Canary parachains can be different than the main ones. Like look at Karura and Akala, for example. I mean, I have to mention the unfortunate incident where this issue wasn't discovered on Karura. There was no configuration fault there, but it was on Akala. And so this is my point. It's like they're not exact copies of each other.
No, they're not. I'm talking about the functionality and the feature set, and you might have a different configuration on two chains. That's fine. But when it comes to like changes of how consensus are worked, or parachain inclusion, or adding a palette here and removing it there, the underlying palette will be the same regardless of where you include it. Yeah. So it's a lot about configurations. Imagine you had Lego blocks and now you've been giving more Lego blocks, but saying, no, these won't work here. That's not how it works. They would work on both chains. It's just your choice on how you put them together.
Sounds good. Cool. And for the final one, before we end this, any last words for the community to reassure them that things are going to be okay with the Canary networks and they're not going to go away anytime soon? Christian, do you want to kick it off, please?
Yeah, sure. I think the main thing to really consider is that the Polkadot ecosystem is really driven by developers. It's a highly technical ecosystem, and it's really favorable for builders. Like there's so many advantages building here, and the more experienced engineers and technical people that generally you speak to are usually really favorable of Kusama. They really like the system, and I think that's a really strong indicator of the usefulness of it. And I think that in the future, we're only going to see more and more innovative products in our ecosystem. So really embracing Kusama is really the right way to go about it, because it just creates more opportunities for us. It's why limit what we can do when, similar to what Sam was saying, we can use the benefit of learning in one place and then pushing it to the next place. And it is relatively efficient. So I'm really bullish on Kusama, and I think we'll see a lot of good things with it in the future.
Sounds good. Let's hope so. Sam?
Yeah, same here. I think something I'd like to remind the community is Polkadot and Kusama and the overall substrate framework. The main consumers of this technology are devs. So you hear some complaints around marketing, whether Parity's not doing enough marketing. If you understand that the core consumers of this are developers, then Polkadot and Kusama or Dotsum as a whole is one of the leading chains just because of developer adoption, right? Once you know that, you realize that the platform is amazingly good at allowing people to evolve and learn as they go along. So that's why Kusama, I don't think Kusama is going away. It's still a perfect place for you to learn about this, about how your products interact with people. So that's why you should remain confident. It's not the perfect chain, but it absolutely is the perfect chain to learn and to evolve. And that, to me, right now, is the most important thing.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a great chat. Hopefully we can do more of these about other topics related to Polkadot and Kusama. It's been really educational and interesting. I've learned a few new things myself, so I hope you, the viewer, also did. I am going to be posting links to both Sam and Christian Polkadot on Twitter in the description of this video if you want to follow them over there and stay up to date with what they've got to share. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so
See ya.
much.